Somewhere within 2 miles of your house right now, a plant that nobody watered, nobody fertilized, and nobody even remembers planting is quietly dropping pounds of fruit onto the ground. No schedule, no spray bottle. And 3 miles in the other direction, someone just spent $60 at a garden center on a single apple tree that will produce 4 apples. 2 with spots, 2 taken by a squirrel before they get back outside. That gap is not an accident. And this video is about closing it. Most of us have lost money and entire growing seasons on plants that needed constant attention just to produce almost nothing. If that sounds familiar, this video was made for you. 15 fruits that do not need babying, resist pests without spraying, and keep feeding you and your family not for one season, but for decades. So please subscribe and turn on notifications if you enjoy this kind of content. This is exactly what this channel is all about. Here is the part nobody puts in the gardening tutorial. For most of human history, fruit was not something you babied. It was something you depended on. Native Americans had been selecting and cultivating the toughest, most self-sufficient plants for thousands of years before settlers arrived. Lewis and Clark's expedition survived stretches of the journey on pawpaws alone. Hardy orange hedges became living fencing on homesteads across the Midwest. Elderberry syrup sat in farmhouse medicine cabinets long before anyone sold it as a supplement. These plants were not curiosities, they were infrastructure. Then commercial agriculture scaled up after the Second World War, and the entire priority system flipped. The question stopped being what survives and became what ships. Hybridized varieties that needed specific soil pH, regular fertilizer schedules, and annual spray programs were not a design flaw, they were a business model. A fruit tree that thrives on neglect for 100 years sells one time. A fruit tree that needs 4 products to survive sells those 4 products every single season. The tough old plants faded out of fashion. Not because they stopped working, because nobody was making money off them anymore. They did not disappear. They are still out there, growing in abandoned lots and along old fence lines, completely indifferent to whether anyone notices. This list is a recovery of 15 of them. As we go through, I will flag a few of these with bonus insights beyond the basic specs, pairing strategies, timing details, and things most sources leave out. And after the last item, I have a specific 3-plant combination strategy that maps this whole list onto the 3 difficult spots almost every yard already has. Worth staying for. Here are 15 forgotten fruits that basically grow themselves. Number 1. Mulberry, the plant that never stops giving. Here is something almost nobody mentions when they talk about mulberries. They do not just produce a lot of fruit, they produce over a 6 to 8 week window. That means you are never buried under a bushel all at once the way you are with most fruiting trees. The harvest spreads itself out and lets you keep up with it. These trees grow in any soil. Sand, clay, compacted urban dirt, it does not matter. They handle drought, they handle wet conditions. No serious pest pressure, no diseases worth worrying about. So cold, hardy, heat-tolerant, and fruiting in just 2 to 3 years after planting. The fruit looks like an elongated blackberry and tastes sweet with just enough tartness to keep it interesting. One mature mulberry tree gives you buckets, not bowls, buckets, of fruit per season. Birds are obsessed with them, which makes the area around a mulberry one of the best wildlife spots in any yard. That bird detail becomes important later, so keep it in the back of your mind. One practical note. Do not plant a mulberry over a driveway or patio. The fruit stains. Plant it in a corner where the mess becomes mulch, and then just let it run. 2 plants in, and already a completely different picture from what the garden center sells. The next one solves a problem most yards have, and almost nobody thinks to address with a fruit plant. Number 2. Hardy Kiwi, the 100-pound vine. Here is a number that sounds like a misprint until you look it up. 100 pounds of fruit per vine. Hardy kiwis are nothing like the fuzzy brown ones from the grocery store. These are smooth-skinned, about the size of a large grape, and you eat the whole thing without peeling. The flavor is sweeter and more concentrated than anything you will find on a shelf. The vines are cold, hardy down to -25 degrees Fahrenheit. They grow fast, covering a fence or arbor in a couple of seasons, and once they hit their stride around year 3 or 4, they keep producing more the longer they are established. They do not get the fungal diseases that plague commercial kiwi. Pests largely ignore them. They will even fruit in partial shade, though a sunnier position increases output significantly. Most fruit plants plateau at a certain production level and stay there. Hardy kiwi compounds. The longer it grows, the more it gives. Your main job is keeping it from consuming the fence entirely. Give it something to climb, step back, and revisit in 3 years. Number 3. Elderberry, the easiest wet soil plant on this list. Most fruiting plants hate wet feet. Elderberry does not care. If you have a low spot in your yard where water sits after rain, where other plants drown out, where you have basically written off that corner as useless, that is prime elderberry territory. These shrubs grow 8 to 12 feet tall in just a couple of years. They produce enormous flat-topped clusters of tiny dark purple berries. One established bush gives you 10 to 15 pounds of fruit per year, reliably, without any intervention. Where elderberries tolerate cold, tolerate heat, grow in sun or part shade, and bring pollinators in waves during their late spring flowering period. The berries go into syrups, jams, wines, and dry like raisins. They have been a staple in European households since before anyone was writing things down. One of those plants that kept showing up generation after generation because it simply never stopped working. Here is one of those bonus insights I said I would flag as we go. Elderberries produce significantly more with a companion nearby. A single bush is productive. 2 bushes planted close together, cross-pollinating each other, will dramatically increase your berry yield. That pairing detail becomes part of the 3-plant strategy at the end, so hold on to it. Number 4. Pawpaw, the tropical fruit that grows in the shade. Most fruit trees demand full sun. Pawpaw is the exception, and that exception is worth a lot if your yard has a shaded corner doing nothing. Pawpaws are America's largest native fruit. Lewis and Clark's crew ate them when other food ran low. They taste like someone blended banana, mango, and custard together, then forgot to include any of the tropical maintenance requirements. They grow naturally in forest understories across the eastern United States, from Michigan down to Florida, which means partial shade is not a compromise. It is literally where they evolved. They have almost zero pest pressure because their leaves contain natural compounds that most insects find repellent. Deer will not touch them. Cold hardy, handles humidity, no spray schedule. The one real catch is patience. Pawpaws take 5 to 7 years to start fruiting. But once they do, they produce for decades. And the fruit that comes off a mature pawpaw is unlike anything at any grocery store in North America. Shaded corner, the spot you thought was useless. Plant pawpaw, come back in 5 years and revise your opinion of that corner entirely. Number 5. Aronia berry, the antioxidant overachiever. Here is the mistake that kills most people's interest in Aronia before they even get started. They eat one raw berry, their mouth puckers from the astringency, and they write the whole plant off. That is like biting into a raw coffee bean and deciding you do not like coffee. Cooked, dried, juiced, or blended into a smoothie, Aronia berries are excellent. And the nutritional profile behind them is not supplement marketing copy. The measured antioxidant levels are higher than blueberries, higher than acai, higher than pretty much any fruit being advertised to you on a health product label right now. That is the documented ORAC value of the fruit, not a claim, a measurement. The shrubs grow 6 to 8 feet tall, handle cold down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, tolerate both wet and dry soil, grow in full sun or part shade, and produce heavy loads of dark purple berries every fall without fail. No diseases, no pest pressure, no inputs after establishment. Plant Aronia somewhere you intend to forget about. Show up in October with a bowl. Quick checkpoint here. The elderberry pairing insight from number 3 is going to show up again in a completely different plant family in just a couple of sections. When it does, the pattern behind the whole end of video strategy will click into place. Keep going. Number 6. Juneberry, the blueberry that actually wants to cooperate. If you have ever spent a full season adjusting soil pH trying to grow blueberries, testing, adding sulfur, waiting, testing again, still wrong, adding more sulfur, and ended up with a handful of berries for the effort, Juneberry is the conversation you should have had at the start. Juneberry produces blueberry-flavored fruit, sweet and rich with a hint of almond, without a single soil amendment. It grows as a tree, a large shrub, or a hedge depending on the variety, anywhere from 6 to 20 feet tall. Handles cold and heat. Grows in sun or partial shade. Fruits reliably every single spring without fail, one of the first plants to flower in the season, which makes it essential for early pollinators. Birds love the fruit, which functions as a natural seed dispersal system, meaning a single Juneberry planting eventually gives you more plants for free without any replanting effort on your part. Disease-resistant, drought-tolerant once established, asks for nothing after the first season. The fruit ripens in June. The name is literal, the results are not. Number 7. American Persimmon, the century plant. Hold this one in mind specifically. It comes back in the post list strategy at the end. A mature American persimmon tree can produce fruit for over 100 years. Not as a record, as a documented baseline. You could plant one today and your great-grandchildren will still be harvesting from it. The settlers who worked these plants into their homestead plantings understood something about time horizons that most modern gardeners have completely lost, that the best planting decision you make today is the one that keeps paying off long after you are gone. American persimmons are native to the eastern United States, adapted across an enormous range of climates: heat, cold, drought, humidity. They grow in poor soil. They do not need spraying. Pests leave them alone. The fruit, when fully ripe, lands somewhere between caramel and apricot, sweet, rich, and unlike anything at a grocery store. The timing issue trips people up more than anything else. Pick persimmons too early, and they are aggressively astringent. Wait until the fruit is completely soft, or falls naturally from the tree, and the experience is completely different. The tree does all the work. Patience is the only input required. Here is the second bonus call-out of this video, and it connects directly back to what I said about elderberries at number 3. Like elderberries, American persimmon's fruit significantly better with a companion. A male tree will not fruit on its own, but having one near your female tree dramatically increases yield. Same principle, different plant. Plan for 2 when you plant persimmons, and notice that pairing strategy keeps showing up, because it matters more than most sources let on. Number 8. Cornelian cherry, the ornamental tree that also feeds you. Here is a question most people never think to ask when they are buying ornamental trees: why is this tree not also producing food? Most ornamental trees are a single-use investment. You pay for them, you plant them, or they look nice, and that is the entire return on the decision. Cornelian cherry does everything an ornamental tree does: beautiful structure, early seasonal interest, excellent presence in a landscape, and then it also produces fruit. It is technically a dogwood, not a cherry at all, producing small, oblong red fruits that are tart enough to make exceptional jams, syrups, and traditional Eastern European fruit leather. Grown across Europe and Asia for thousands of years. Almost completely unknown in North America. The tree blooms in late winter, sometimes February or March, with bright yellow flowers that appear before anything else in the garden has woken up. That early bloom is a genuine lifeline for bees emerging before the rest of the landscape has anything to offer. The fruit ripens in midsummer. So cold hardy to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit, survives drought, grows in poor soil, tolerates urban conditions that would stress most ornamentals. Pair this with the Nanking cherry in the next section, and you have a 2-season early production setup that requires nothing from you and looks like it was professionally designed. Number 9. Nanking cherry, the bush that beats the weather. Here is something most people get completely wrong about cherries. They picture a tall tree, a ladder to reach the fruit, and a narrow climate window that excludes half the country. Nanking cherry is none of that. This is a bush, 6 to 10 feet tall, fully harvestable from the ground. Cold hardy down to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Thrives in poor sandy soil where other fruit plants give up entirely. drought-tolerant, rarely diseased, soon producing small, tart cherries in just 2 to 3 years from planting. In early spring, before almost anything else in the garden moves, Nanking cherry covers itself in pink flowers. It is one of the most reliable early-season nectar sources available to pollinators, and it converts those flowers into fruit with almost nothing required on your end. As I mentioned coming out of the Cornelian cherry section, plant these two together. Cornelian cherry blooms in late winter. Nanking cherry follows weeks later in early spring. Between them, you have continuous ornamental interest, overlapping pollinator support, and 2 harvests across the earliest part of the season from 2 plants that together cost less to establish than a single high-maintenance hybrid from a garden center. Number 10. Hardy figure. The survivor that feeds itself. 200 figs per year from a single mature tree. That is not an exceptional season. That is a normal one. Most people hear fig and think tropical. The reality is that certain varieties, Chicago hardy being the most proven for cold climates, survive winters down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And even when top growth dies back in a hard freeze, the root system survives and sends up new growth that fruits that same season. You do not lose a year. You lose some canes, and the plant restarts from the ground like nothing happened. Figs grow in containers and in the ground. Poor soil and rich soil. They handle heat, humidity, and neglect better than almost any other fruiting plant on this list. The fruit does not need processing. You pick it, you eat it. See, established figs are drought-tolerant enough to produce through summers that kill other plants without a drop of supplemental water. There is a documented pattern of fig trees growing in sidewalk cracks, in abandoned lots, in the corners of old stone buildings, thriving on nothing but rainwater and decades of being left alone. Apply that level of persistence to your intentional garden space, and production becomes essentially guaranteed. Number 11. Beach plum, the soil improver that also makes jam. Here is something worth knowing before you spend another $1 on fertilizer. There are plants that fix their own nitrogen directly from the air and deposit it into the soil around them. Beach plum is one of them. While you are buying fertilizer for other plants, our beach plum is pulling nitrogen out of the atmosphere and building the ground it grows in, actively improving its own growing conditions while it produces. Zero fertilizer input, zero amendments. It is constructing its own infrastructure. These native coastal shrubs grow about 6 feet tall, produce white flower clusters in spring, and give you small, intensely flavored plums that make exceptional jam. They handle sandy soil, salt spray, drought, and harsh conditions that most ornamentals cannot survive a single season through. They spread by forming thickets. One plant becomes several over time, increasing production without any replanting effort on your part. Commercial growers do not touch beach plums because the fruit is too variable for mass production. That variability is completely irrelevant to a home gardener. Then what matters is consistent annual production, soil improvement, and zero inputs after establishment. Beach plum delivers all 3 simultaneously. Number 12. Autumn olive, the productive outlier. Up front on this one, in some regions, autumn olive is listed as invasive because it grows so aggressively. Check your local regulations before planting. If it is on a prohibited list in your state, skip ahead to number 13. If it is legal where you are, and especially if you have a large property, a degraded patch, or ground where nothing productive is currently growing, autumn olive is one of the highest yield plants on this entire list. A single mature bush produces 30 to 40 pounds of small red berries per season. Those berries contain lycopene at levels higher than tomatoes. Not a supplement claim, a measured nutritional fact. The plants fix nitrogen the same way beach plum does, growing in pure sand or clay without any amendment, handling drought conditions that would devastate most fruiting shrubs. The berries are tart fresh, but excellent in jam, fruit leather, or blended with other fruit. The rule with autumn olive is management. Use it deliberately, on contained ground, away from wild areas where it can spread beyond your property line. Treat it as a productive tool with boundaries rather than a ground cover, and it performs exceptionally well within those boundaries. Number 13. Chickasaw plum, the living fence that feeds you. Picture a property boundary with nothing on it. Within 3 years, that same boundary is a dense, productive thicket, providing privacy, wildlife habitat, erosion control, and pounds of sweet plums every summer, all from a single original planting. Chickasaw plum spreads by root suckers. One plant becomes many. This is not an accidental feature. It is exactly why settlers across the southern United States use Chickasaw plums specifically as living fence lines. Planted once, established itself, spread on its own, and became self-sustaining infrastructure that also produced food. Some of those original fence plantings are still standing and still fruiting. The plums are small, about an inch across, but intensely flavored, excellent fresh or preserved. The plants handle heat, drought, and poor soil without complaint. They bloom with white flower clusters in early spring and provide cover for birds and beneficial insects throughout the season. Once established, Chickasaw plum needs nothing from you. It is one of the few plants on this list that functions simultaneously as food production, property management, and wildlife habitat. 3 returns from a single planting decision. Number 14. Medlar. The forgotten fruit from Roman times. Medlar was grown in Roman gardens. It moved through medieval Europe as a staple orchard tree. Shakespeare referenced it. And then, somewhere in the 20th century, it simply dropped out of circulation. Not because it stopped working, but because the commercial system had no use for it and garden fashion moved on. The fruit looks unusual, like a large rose hip with a flattened top, and it requires a process called bletting after harvest, where you allow it to soften at room temperature before eating. That sounds fussy until you taste the result. Bletted medlar is sweet and deeply complex, somewhere between spiced apple butter and brown sugar with a texture unlike anything else in the fruit world. It is the kind of flavor that makes you understand immediately why it survived in gardens for 2,000 years before anyone decided to stop growing it. Medlar trees are cold hardy, grow in average soil, have virtually no pest problems, produce beautiful white flowers in spring, and display impressive fall color before the fruit hangs late into the season, often harvestable after the first frost. These trees live and produce for over 100 years. The only reason medlar disappeared from modern gardens is fashion. The plant never changed. It is still exactly as productive, exactly as resilient, and exactly as good as it was when Roman gardeners first put it in the ground. Number 15. Hardy orange, the living legacy. The only truly cold hardy citrus on the planet. Survives winters down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Hardy orange, also called trifoliate orange or Poncirus trifoliata, produces small, intensely sour fruit that smells extraordinary and makes exceptional marmalade. But the reason this plant earned its place in homestead history has almost nothing to do with the marmalade. Hardy orange has thorns that are not decorative. They are massive, structural, and completely effective. The plant grows into a dense, impenetrable hedge, the kind of barrier that stops livestock, discourages predators, and does not require maintenance to keep doing its job. Pioneers across the American South and Midwest planted it specifically as living fencing, because once it was established, it maintained itself indefinitely. Those hedges were planted once and functioned for generations. Some of the original plantings are still standing today, still fruiting, still functioning as barriers, more than a century after the people who made that decision are gone. The plants need no care, handle any soil, survive drought without flinching, bloom with fragrant white flowers in spring, fruit in fall, maintain green stems through winter as year-round structural interest in the landscape. The fruit is too sour to eat fresh, but the zest in cooking, and especially the marmalade, are genuinely exceptional. Plant a hardy orange today, and you are not just adding a fruit plant to your yard. You are establishing something that will still be productive when your grandchildren are deciding what to plant in their own yards. That is the definition of a legacy planting. And it is the right note to end this list on, because the whole point of everything on it is exactly that. Plants that outlast the effort it takes to put them in the ground. Here is what I promised at the start, and this is the piece that makes everything on this list actionable rather than just interesting. If the strategy I'm about to show you is the kind of thing you want every week, this is the right channel. Subscribe before you forget. Most yards have 3 problem spots: a low wet corner where water sits after rain, a shaded area that feels useless for growing anything, and a sunny patch that is currently producing nothing. The combination strategy is about matching the right plants from this list to those 3 specific spots: wet corner, 2 elderberry bushes. As I flagged at number 3, see, elderberries thrive where other plants drown, and 2 plants together cross-pollinate and dramatically increase berry yield over a single bush. Put them at the lowest point of your yard and let the drainage problem become a production asset. That spot stops being a liability the season you plant them. Shaded area, Pawpaw. As covered at number 4, Pawpaw evolved in forest understories. It does not just tolerate shade, it prefers it. While every other fruit plant is competing for your sunniest ground, Pawpaw fills the spot you thought was wasted. 5 to 7 years of patience, then decades of production from a corner that was doing nothing. Sunny patch, Mulberry plus American Persimmon. Here is where the bird detail from number 1 pays off. On mulberry fruits from early summer through midsummer and pulls enormous bird traffic to that area of your yard. Persimmon fruits in fall after the mulberry is completely finished. The birds that spent the summer around your mulberry move naturally to the persimmon in October, and that sustained wildlife activity helps with pest management across the surrounding garden area through both seasons. And, as I noted at number 7, plant a male and female persimmon together for significantly better yields. Same principle I flagged for elderberries. Companions matter. That is the full setup. Elderberry in the wet spot, Pawpaw in the shade, Mulberry and Persimmon in the sun. 4 to 5 plants, mapped onto the spots most properties already have, producing fruit from June through October, requiring almost nothing from you after the first season. 1 planting decision. Decades of return. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to this channel and be part of our growing community. Also, like and share so it can reach a wider audience of garden enthusiasts who might also find the information shared on this video helpful. Which plant on this list are you putting in the ground first? And what spot in your yard are you finally going to do something with? Drop it in the comments below.